I am the Swarm. Author, Quantum Wizard. Chapter 201, Speculations, 2. Luo Wen quietly observed everything without interfering too much. However, his mind was racing, collecting and summarizing all the information. As the data accumulated, his anxiety began to ease. The likelihood that the other party belonged to an advanced civilization seemed extremely low. As long as their technology didn't completely overpower the swarm, there would still be a chance for a fight. At that moment, an intelligent entity raised a hand to request to speak. Luo Wen nodded, and the room fell silent. The intelligent entity, named Tychus, was a protégé in Morgan's extended academic lineage. Once a ratfolk prodigy in his era, Tychus had specialized in mathematics and dabbled in numerous cutting-edge technologies. Overlord, based on our group's calculations, the opposing party likely originates from the M37 star system, 9.7 light-years from the Genesis star system and 5.1 light-years from the neighboring star system. Oh? What's your reasoning? Luo Wen asked. By tracing the unknown civilization's vessel trajectory in reverse, the path points directly to the M37 star system. Furthermore, they've made virtually no course corrections along the way, Tychus explained. How can you be sure they didn't intentionally detour through the M37 star system and then re-emerge from there? Another intelligent entity asked. We've all fallen into a common misconception that the entire luminous structure is their ship. But what if this is only their propulsion device? Tychus proposed, requesting Luo Wen's authorization to display supporting visuals. Take a look. This is from one of our previous research projects, theorizing a propulsion system. We know that light consists of massless photons with kinetic energy. When photons strike a smooth surface, they can rebound, much like a ping-pong ball hitting a wall, exerting force on the impacted object. Tychus paused to let everyone absorb the information before continuing. The thrust produced by a single photon is extremely minute within a square meter. It would barely amount to the weight of an ant. Therefore, to achieve meaningful acceleration from sunlight, the surface area of the propulsion mechanism must be extraordinarily large and lightweight. For instance, a vessel using such a system would require an enormous sail. As the other intelligent entities pondered this, Tychus elaborated further, this type of propulsion system doesn't require fuel and can accelerate continuously. However, the acceleration process takes an exceptionally long time. If we assume the unknown civilization's vessel uses such a propulsion system, many previously puzzling aspects become logical. Firstly, regarding the ship's size, we may actually be observing an enormous solar sail. Its operating principle would involve absorbing photon impacts and using the reactive force to propel forward. Simultaneously, it would reflect photons outward. Given our reliance on optical detection, which is highly sensitive to photons, this would explain why the observed image appears so dazzling. Scanning the room and seeing many entities nod in agreement, Tychus continued, additionally, since this propulsion system doesn't require fuel, it wouldn't produce an exhaust trail, which matches what we've observed. But this is only a theoretical hypothesis. Is such a solar sail even feasible? One entity questioned. This technology was deemed unsuitable for our species and discarded before any prototypes were developed. However, its theory is sound. With advances in computational technology, we've conducted simulated experiments that confirm its feasibility, Tychus replied. The room buzzed with murmurs. Solar sail technology was a niche topic, and most entities had only a superficial understanding of it. However, Tychus's argument was compelling. Luo Wen cleared his throat, restoring order to the room. He motioned for Tychus to continue. Bowing to Luo Wen, Tychus resumed, if we assume this is indeed a light sail-driven vessel, then reaching its current speed from a stationary start would take decades of continuous acceleration. The distance traveled during this time aligns almost perfectly with the journey from the M37 star system to its current location, with a margin of error under 1%. Given the acceleration constraints of this propulsion method, mid-course adjustments are highly unlikely, as any course correction would significantly reduce their hard-earned speed. The idea that they traveled to the M37 star system first and then diverted to the neighboring star system is even less plausible. Their propulsion method doesn't support such a maneuver. Furthermore, if they can detect abnormal energy fluctuations in the neighboring star system, their observational technology must be extremely advanced. They would likely assess the system's conditions and, finding no threats, have no need for such a convoluted approach, he concluded, muttering under his breath, unless, like the Overlord, they specialize in outsmarting the air itself. As the godlike figure in the swarm network, Luo Wen naturally overheard Tychus's mutterings. However, given the solid reasoning behind his analysis, Luo Wen decided to let it slide for now. Realizing Luo Wen's attention was on him, Tychus hurriedly continued. Moreover, by estimating the dimensions of the solar sail and considering the travel distance, we can deduce that the ship's actual size might only be a few hundred meters. Although we lack specifics on the sail's thickness or the M37 star system stellar conditions, this margin of error is negligible. The opposing ship isn't as formidable as we initially thought. After finishing his presentation and bowing again to Luo Wen, Tychus returned to his seat. Luo Wen sank into contemplation. Tychus's analysis was logical and addressed previous inconsistencies, making it perhaps the most plausible hypothesis. However, inter-civilization interactions couldn't rely solely on speculation. Luo Wen needed confirmation of these findings. Any unexpected variables could lead to catastrophic consequences. While the other entities continued to discuss enthusiastically, no additional constructive suggestions emerged. Having made his decision, Luo Wen left the entities to deliberate further and began preparing a response strategy. It was now certain that the unknown civilization's vessel was heading straight for the neighboring star system. The priority was to ascertain their true capabilities and intentions. Yet, the swarm's forces in the neighboring star system were insufficient to conduct effective reconnaissance. It seemed they would need to remain patient for a while longer. Chapter 202, Arrival. Fortunately, when the swarm initially settled on the Great Dawn planet, they refrained from making large-scale ecological changes. Only the Red Forest, home to the swarm's base, had undergone significant alterations. At this moment, the purple-gray fungal carpet covering the forest floor began retracting beneath the surface, revealing the original color of the ground. Although the fungal carpet was hidden, the local wildlife was no longer under the swarm's control. Luo Wen hoped they could return to their natural habitats in the coming years. Otherwise, a forest devoid of life would be far too conspicuous. Flying bugs patrolled the forest repeatedly, directing worker drones to meticulously remove all traces of the swarm's presence, restoring the area to its pre-swarm state. Unnecessary combat units, such as the terror wolves, were systematically reclaimed. Though their external appearances remained intact, their internal ecological circulatory systems were glaringly alien. Such anomalies would risk exposing the swarm, a cost too great to bear. Even large aerial transport units like the Storm God were mostly withdrawn after completing their tasks. Only a small number were hidden deep underground in hibernation. The odd-headed fish in the oceans weren't reclaimed but retreated beneath the surface along with the fungal carpet, avoiding the vicinity of Godzilla's hibernation site. It was clear the unknown civilization had been drawn to the thermonuclear breath emitted by Godzilla. A major battle might occur near the area, so it was prudent to steer clear of the location. However, to prevent Godzilla from being captured, Luo Wen prepared several swarm units equipped with storage stomachs. If the opposing civilization's technology didn't completely overpower the swarm, he would find opportunities to collect some of Godzilla's biological material, even if exposure became inevitable. Of course, this plan depended on Godzilla suffering physical damage during a battle. Without such an occurrence, it would remain unfeasible. Given the other party's speed, they would arrive only 7 or 8 years ahead of Luo Wen's main body. If Luo Wen could seize even a small sample of tissue and store it in the extreme cold of the polar regions, Godzilla's unique biological properties might preserve it for those years without deterioration. Even if the tissue degraded, Luo Wen would still use it for the swarm's advancement. After all, in his early days as a mere bug, he had done far worse for survival. Half a month later, preparations were complete. The swarm seemed to have vanished from the Great Dawn planet. Animals began reappearing in the Red Forest, and the forest once again echoed with the calls of wildlife, teeming with vitality. Across the outskirts of the neighboring star system, all active swarm meteors focused their observational organs on the incoming alien ship, hoping to confirm whether it was indeed powered by a solar sail. Time passed tensely. Several years went by in the blink of an eye. Over the decades, the swarm had launched numerous swarm meteors toward the neighboring star system. As the alien ship approached, it inevitably came within the monitoring range of the swarm's observation units. With their preparations in place, the alien ship never escaped the swarm's watchful gaze after entering its range. However, due to the vast distance and the outdated observational organs aboard the swarm meteors, they couldn't penetrate the dazzling light emitted by the ship to discern its nature. Fortunately, these older models emitted negligible energy signals, allowing them to observe the ship without being detected. Nonetheless, the swarm gleaned some information from various signs. For instance, the ship's size had decreased, and its speed had slowed slightly. The intelligent entities speculated that the ship was preparing to enter the more complex spatial environment of the neighboring star system by reducing the size of its solar sail and decreasing its velocity. These observations further validated Tychus's earlier hypothesis that the unknown civilization was employing solar sail propulsion. This indicated that while the opposing technology might be slightly more advanced than the swarms, the gap wasn't insurmountable. Even though the hypothesis seemed confirmed, the cautious Luo Wen still felt the need for direct observation. Several days later, the ship crossed the outermost debris field of the neighboring star system. Its size had shrunk by 90%, and its speed had dropped to less than 1/100th of its original. At that moment, planet A5 in the neighboring star system rotated into a position just ahead of the ship. When the greeting gift had landed on the Great Dawn planet, 2 additional swarm meteors had remained on standby. After determining that the Great Dawn planet required no support, these meteors settled into planetary orbits, awaiting Luo Wen's arrival. One of these meteors was stationed in orbit around planet A5, providing the swarm its first close observation of the alien ship. Although close in space meant a distance of approximately 2 billion kilometers, it was still remarkably near in astronomical terms compared to the 94 trillion kilometers in a light year. There were no dramatic surprises. The reality matched the predictions. The ship used an extremely thin solar sail to propel itself forward. Behind the solar sail was a ship that seemed minuscule in comparison. Measuring roughly 300 meters in length, it had a narrow cylindrical shape, giving it a peculiar appearance akin to a chopstick. Luo Wen exhaled in relief. A ship this unsightly hardly seemed capable of formidable combat capabilities. This flexibility in the swarm's strategy opened up many tactical possibilities. Even if the aliens managed to capture Godzilla without leaving behind any tissue samples, the solar sail's slow initial acceleration meant Luo Wen's bio-ships could catch up and forcibly retrieve the organism once his main body arrived. However, Luo Wen remained cautious. Determining the true extent of the other party's technological capabilities would still require careful investigation. For now, he would observe their actions closely. "Captain, we are approaching planet T853. The ship's speed has reduced to 10 km per second. We are expected to reach our designated orbit in 30 minutes, a mechanical female voice announced in the control room. "Excellent. Celia, notify all crew members to take their positions." At this point, the Cat's Ear spaceship, with its massive solar sails retracted, advanced toward the Great Dawn planet. Energy streams periodically burst from various parts of its elongated hull, making fine adjustments to its orientation. 10, 9, 3, 2, 1. The ship has reached its designated position. Orbit alignment successful. Thrusters offline. As the mechanical countdown concluded, the ship trembled slightly before stabilizing in its orbit around the Great Dawn planet. For a civilization capable of interstellar travel, such maneuvers were routine, leaving little room for mishap. Chapter 203, Discovery. Celia, notify the repair crew to perform a final check on the satellites, then deploy them, Captain Reggie ordered once the ship stabilized. Understood. The Cat's Ear spaceship measured 360 meters in length but had a diameter of less than 10 meters. Since it relied primarily on a solar sail spanning tens of kilometers for propulsion, maneuvering was extremely challenging, necessitating a design that minimized its collision surface. As long as the ship itself avoided impacts, minor solar sail damage was acceptable, as those components were reparable. About 10 minutes later, a hatch on the Cat's Ear spaceship opened, releasing a small 20-meter-long craft. It deployed satellites, each approximately 3 meters in size, into their designated orbits. With the satellites in place, the command center became a hub of activity. Dozens of crew members busied themselves at their stations, carefully analyzing the incoming data displayed on their monitors and reporting their findings to Captain Reggie, seated at the center of the hall. "Strange," Captain Reggie murmured to himself. The Cat's Ear spaceship was coated in an advanced stealth material. Unlike the swarm's optical camouflage, its primary function was to absorb various electromagnetic waves, making radar detection ineffective. However, it offered little advantage against visual observation. Reggie had expected planet T853's civilization to have reached a level of technological sophistication capable of utilizing radar systems, given its use of fusion reactors. Thus, the approach had kept him somewhat on edge. Despite his confident demeanor earlier, he wasn't entirely sure the Reikon's technological edge would completely overwhelm T853's civilization. If the stealth coating failed and they were detected, a barrage of nuclear missiles might prove too much for the cat's ear spaceship's limited evasive capabilities. Yet, as the ship approached the planet, Reggie grew increasingly perplexed. The eerie silence in orbit was unnerving. There wasn't a single piece of space debris to be found. Initially, his plan had been to approach slowly, observe at a safe distance, and maintain ample time to respond in case of an attack. But as the ship drew closer, one cautious step after another was abandoned, and eventually, they boldly docked in planetary orbit without any resistance. Even now, after safely aligning their orbit, Reggie struggled to believe how easily it had been accomplished. Could it be that this civilization was uninterested in the skies above them? Was such a thing even possible? As data from the satellites began streaming back to the ship, Captain Reggie's confusion deepened. Captain, satellites 1 and 5 report no signs of civilization on the surface of planet T853. Captain, satellites 2 and 3 also report no traces of civilization. Captain, satellites 4 and 7 confirm the same. Captain, the same. Reggie's forehead creased, question marks practically flashing above his head. Had they arrived at the wrong place? That couldn't be possible. They weren't navigating by sight. Celia, are our navigation systems functioning correctly? Seconds later, the mechanical voice responded, Captain, the deviation between the actual and planned course is less than 0.01%. Navigation data is normal, and we have not veered off course. Then what was happening? If there were no signs of civilization on the planet, where had the fusion reactions come from? Reggie's head filled with even more questions. Captain, radiation remnants detected in 2 locations on Continent 3, a crew member suddenly reported, breaking the tense atmosphere. Everyone in the room stiffened. The unsettling silence earlier had confused not just Reggie but the rest of the crew as well. Finally, a clue had surfaced, corroborating their earlier observations of fusion reactions on the planet. The atmospheric interference had obscured the specifics, leaving them with incomplete data. The reality, however, seemed to diverge from their expectations. Send the security team along with the research group to investigate, Reggie ordered. The ship was equipped not only with its standard crew and research team but also with a 500-strong rapid response military unit for protection. The cat's ear spaceship, with its unconventional design, was incapable of atmospheric entry. However, it carried smaller escort ships and transport vessels suited for such tasks. Soon, a side hatch opened, releasing an escort vessel and a transport craft toward the anomalous radiation sites. They're here. The swarm had been monitoring the cat's ear spaceship all along. However, due to limited observational units in the neighboring star system, their surveillance was restricted to tracking the ship's general location without precise detail. While the Genesis planet's brood queens had the capability to produce orbital slings and swarm meteors, using such devices within the atmosphere was a self-destructive endeavor. The immense kinetic energy generated during deployment turned the surrounding air into an impenetrable barrier, leading to catastrophic failure. The swarm's strategic position at planets A5, A6, and A7 had allowed them to station swarm meteors capable of descending, spreading fungal carpets, and launching further meteors toward planet A3's orbit. Yet, uncertainties about the enemy's technology and time constraints had led Luo Wen and the intelligent entities to veto such actions, fearing unnecessary complications. Nevertheless, while the swarm had sparse reconnaissance units in space, the Great Dawn planet was their stronghold. Despite withdrawing many conspicuous combat units earlier, they had retained scout bugs, worker ants, and drones, which had woven an intricate three-dimensional surveillance network in non-radiation zones. Now, the prey had arrived. 2 20-meter-long mechanical ships descended with a roar, flattening the 2-meter-high grass beneath their energy streams. One ship featured visible weaponry, marking it as an armed escort vessel, while the other carried only 2 mounted machine gun-like weapons, indicating it was a transport craft. Once they landed, the transport ship's hatch opened, and a group of humanoids cautiously disembarked. Under the bright daylight, scout bugs concealed among the flora advanced stealthily, providing Luo Wen and the others with a clearer view. The team comprised over 50 individuals, with about 20 carrying various instruments and dressed in fully sealed yet lightweight protective suits. The light diffusing visors on their helmets obscured their faces. The rest of the team bore rifle-like weapons and wore visibly thicker protective suits, suggesting superior defensive capabilities. These individuals were noticeably taller, ranging from 2.3 to 2.7 meters. Luo Wen, familiar with countless blockbusters, easily identified them as a research team under the guard of a military escort. Unfortunately, the radiation levels in the area were too high for typical creatures to approach. Otherwise, Luo Wen could have driven some beasts to attack and test their weaponry to understand their combat capabilities. Chapter 204, Investigation. The Riken had deployed a dozen small satellites in stationary orbit around the Great Dawn planet, establishing a rudimentary communication network. A leading researcher tapped a few commands on the portable computer strapped to his left arm, opening a communication link to the Cat's Ear spaceship. Captain, the atmosphere of planet T853 contains numerous toxins that we cannot withstand. Exposure to the air for more than 5 minutes without protection would be fatal. However, we should be capable of terraforming the environment. Given a few centuries, it might become suitable for the Riken to inhabit. Lute, you know I don't care about that. Just tell me something I'd find interesting, Captain Reggie replied, watching the main screen on the ship's bridge. Fine, Reggie, you're always so impatient. Dr. Lute, who had been a close friend of Captain Reggie for many years before this mission, spoke casually. At the target area, we detected significant radiation remnants, confirming this is indeed the site of a nuclear explosion. But I have no idea what caused this nuclear detonation or what it was targeting. I need your authorization to use the Hive drone system for further investigation. Celia, grant Dr. Lute permission to use the Hive drone system. Understood, Captain, the mechanical female voice replied. Lute, I look forward to your good news. Dr. Lute nodded as the image disappeared from the screen, and Captain Reggie gazed out at the Great Dawn planet in contemplation. On the planet's surface, the turret-mounted ship opened a top hatch, releasing drones about 30 centimeters in size. Over 30 drones emerged before the hatch was sealed again. The drones circled above the ship for a moment before dispersing in all directions. These drones were equipped with a variety of detection systems and advanced imaging capabilities. They conducted low-altitude, grid-like searches for any anomalies, flying just 50 meters above the ground. Dr. Lute meticulously reviewed the data transmitted by the drones, ruling out abnormalities one by one. Celia, filter the drone footage for all non-natural anomalies, Dr. Lute instructed. The number of anomalies flagged by the drones was overwhelming due to this being their first visit to an alien world. Everything seemed abnormal to the drone systems. The drones, with their basic artificial intelligence, lacked the sophistication to differentiate these anomalies, leaving Dr. Lute swamped. He had no choice but to turn to the advanced AI for assistance. Permission granted. Beginning analysis of drone footage, the mechanical voice spoke through the communicator in Dr. Lute's helmet, taking over the tedious task. Although Celia was not a true artificial intelligence, it was an advanced AI with highly complex calculations. However, it could only filter out the most obviously irrelevant footage, forwarding uncertain findings to Dr. Lute for further review. The area had long since been scoured by the swarm. Even the carbonized remains of the terror wolves, reduced to ashes by nuclear flames, had been thoroughly collected and disposed of. The only remains left behind were the corpses of native feral dire wolves. As expected, the drones soon captured multiple images of what appeared to be carbonized biological material. These were flagged by Celia's initial filter and forwarded to Dr. Lute's terminal. Excellent, Celia. Instruct the drones to collect these carbonized samples. Oh, heavens, there's a nearly intact skull here. That'll make our work significantly easier. Have the drones prioritize retrieving it. Understood, Dr. Lute. Several drones returned, bringing back carbonized samples. A short while later, a drone finally delivered the skull Dr. Lute had been eager to examine. The skull had been flung a considerable distance by the explosion, delaying its retrieval. Though the left side was shattered and much was missing, it remained largely intact. Examining the half-meter-long skull, Dr. Lute sighed, what a massive creature this must have been. He called over an assistant to scan the skull's structure and reconstruct its original appearance. Doctor, our portable equipment cannot analyze the DNA of these carbonized samples. That will require processing aboard the ship. However, the skull scan is complete, and we've attempted to reconstruct its external features, reported his young female assistant, transferring the reconstructed image to Dr. Lute's terminal. A ferocious-looking face. Not something to mess with lightly. Celia, use the low-orbit satellites to search the planet for creatures resembling this one. Dr. Lute, you do not have authorization to access the low-orbit satellites, the mechanical voice replied. Then request authorization from your captain. Dr. Lute snapped, frustrated by the rigid protocols of the intelligent AI. Dr. Lute, your request has been approved. Beginning the search. Please wait. Dr. Loot, the search found an 85% similarity match. A video showing a pack of feral direwolves resting on a plane appeared on Dr. Loot's terminal. These must be them. Wow, there are quite a few of them, Dr. Loot remarked. Since the Riken lacked prior data on the Great Dawn planet's fauna, the reconstructed image wouldn't perfectly match the original. Still, an 80% similarity was enough for confirmation. Satellite data indicates that these creatures are spread across 325 locations on this continent, with the total population exceeding 500,000. That many? What do they eat? Dr. Loot was stunned. The sheer size of the direwolves and their carnivorous dentition suggested a significant food requirement. The AI promptly responded, based on calculations, these creatures are likely a food source for others. Probability, 79%. A picture of a bull demon appeared on Dr. Loot's display. Oh, what an intriguing species. If we could breed them on our home world, they'd surely sell for a high price. But plant resources are incredibly scarce on the home world. Dr. Loot quickly realized the economic potential of the bull demons. Millennia of industrial pollution had devastated the Riken homeworld's environment. From birth, his diet had consisted almost entirely of synthetic meat, with rare occasions of real meat being a luxury. You're right, Loot. These creatures are indeed valuable, but unfortunately, our homeworld no longer has any grasslands to sustain them, Captain Reggie's voice suddenly interjected through Dr. Loot's communicator. Hey, Reggie, eavesdropping is a bad habit, Dr. Loot quipped. I'm merely monitoring the progress of your work. It's my duty as the captain and mission leader, Captain Reggie replied flatly, showing no reaction to Dr. Loot's jab. Dr. Loot shrugged. Having known Reggie for years, he understood the captain's personality. Continuing the topic would strain their friendship and only frustrate him further. I need your authorization to command the security team, just the group accompanying me. What do you plan to do? Captain Reggie asked, puzzled. I need them to capture a few native creatures and bring them back to the ship for detailed analysis. All right, but be careful. Chapter 205, Observing in Secret. Sergeant Hasmu, I need you to lead your team to this location and capture several native creatures. The target images and coordinates have been sent to you, Dr. Loot instructed. The Cat's Ear spaceship carried a 500-member security force divided into 10 squads. Opposite Dr. Loot was one of the squad leaders, Sergeant Hasmu, responsible for ensuring the safety of this planetary expedition. Half of his team had disembarked to provide protection, while the other half remained on the ship, ready to offer covering fire if needed. Sergeant Hasmu was also the tallest Riken among those who landed on the planet. Equipped with his gear, his 2.7-meter frame towered over Dr. Loot's comparatively diminutive 2.1-meter stature, making the latter seem almost childlike in comparison. Understood, Dr. Loot. But what about your safety? Don't worry about us. The other non-combat personnel and I will take the transport craft back to the ship. You, however, must exercise caution. The situation here is extremely peculiar, and we don't know what might be lurking in the shadows, Dr. Loot emphasized. Understood, Sergeant Hasmu replied with a nod. The strangeness of the situation was not lost on him, even as a soldier, he could sense it. They had expected to find a civilization here, yet discovered nothing. Then, when they suspected a navigational error, they stumbled upon radiation remnants on the planet's surface. After escorting Dr. Loot and the others back to the transport craft and watching it ascend, Sergeant Hasmu gathered his team and returned to the gunboat. The 20-meter-long gunboat was cramped with 50 personnel aboard. On the journey down, half had traveled aboard the transport craft, which alleviated the crowding. Fortunately, Captain Reggie had dispatched an additional transport craft to assist them. Otherwise, even if they managed to capture their targets, there would have been no way to transport them back. The gunboat took off, heading toward the designated coordinates. Meanwhile, the swarm, concealed in the shadows, shifted its focus onto the gunboat. This vessel was clearly on a mission. As it departed the radiation zone, it presented the swarm with an opportunity. If the Riken weren't planning to entertain themselves, the swarm might have driven some native creatures to stir up trouble. However, this time, it seemed unnecessary for the swarm to act directly. The gunboat's destination was clear: a direct flight to the nearest feral dire wolf den located near the radiation zone. Luo Wen immediately directed all nearby swarm units to maintain a safe distance while establishing comprehensive surveillance over the area. The Riken gunboat traveled quickly, covering the 50 kilometers in about 3 minutes, a feat attributed to the short distance that barely allowed the vessel to reach full speed. The ensuing skirmish was brief, lasting only a few minutes before the security team overpowered the feral dire wolf den. The operation began with the deployment of 30 armed personnel a kilometer away from the den. The gunboat then ascended, releasing both reconnaissance and armed drones. While the number of armed drones was small, fewer than 10, their 1-meter-long frames, mounted machine guns, and 4 missiles each, provided formidable firepower. The reconnaissance drones reached the den first, providing the team with a visual overview and marking targets. With their aid, the security team initiated long-range attacks from their position a kilometer away. They employed energy weapons, rifle-like devices that emitted 10-centimeter-long red beams. Upon contact, the beams inflicted burn damage and triggered explosions for secondary effects. Though these weapons packed a punch, their firing rate was relatively slow, at about 3 to 4 shots per second. The upside was that they appeared to require minimal reloading. Luo Wen observed each gun firing over 100 rounds without anyone swapping magazines. Against the primitive feral dire wolves, such ranged weaponry was more than adequate. The fiery explosions seemed to awaken a primal fear buried deep in the dire wolves' genes. While the scenes differed somewhat from their inherited memories, the destructive force bore enough similarity to evoke terror. The den, home to over 300 feral dire wolves, scattered after leaving behind several dozen corpses. The security team did not pursue them but instead consolidated their spoils and established a defensive perimeter to await the arrival of the transport craft. Meanwhile, within the swarm network, a discussion about the skirmish and its implications was underway. Overlord, their technology, while different from ours, is not beyond our understanding. These firearms likely use some mechanism to process energy into beam-like projectiles, an intelligent entity began. Indeed. Moreover, these energy weapons should be susceptible to our optical cloaking systems. Our cloaking technology utilizes nanocrystals on the surface to mimic environmental light reflections, blending into the surroundings. By analyzing the spectrum of their weapons, we should be able to adjust the nanocrystals to deflect the beams, another intelligent entity suggested. I disagree, interjected Tychus. While the projectiles are fast, they don't surpass our visual threshold. We can still see them streaking through the air. If these truly were light-based weapons, they would travel at the speed of light, making them invisible to the naked eye. The intelligent entities murmured amongst themselves, exchanging views. Luo Wen found himself leaning toward Tychus's perspective. Having lived on the Genesis planet for years and absorbed much knowledge, he now considered himself a quasi-intellectual. These firearms likely condensed energy into projectiles that resembled beams but were in fact energy aggregates. This explained why their flight paths were visible. If that were the case, optical cloaking would be ineffective against these weapons, as it couldn't deflect such energy. However, the bright nature of the projectiles made them easier to detect than the nearly invisible trajectories of metallic bullets. Luo Wen speculated that with the swarm's advanced dynamic vision systems and enhanced reflexes, there was a reasonable chance of evading these projectiles. In any case, practical tests would be required to confirm their efficacy. For now, Luo Wen had no means to act directly without his physical body on site. With the weaponry discussion settled, the meeting shifted to the next agenda, devising strategies to confront this civilization from the M37 star system. Chapter 206, Clues. Overlord, we currently lack sufficient information. I believe it's not appropriate to engage the other party directly at this time, Morgan stated. Indeed, Overlord, another intelligent entity agreed. Although the technology on their ship isn't particularly advanced, we don't know its status within their civilization. Is this a collective asset or an individual endeavor? Is this mission state-sponsored or privately initiated? These factors are unclear, making it difficult to judge. Do they have allies? Are they a subordinate civilization to a higher-level society? Is there any possibility of forming an alliance? The swarm only requires technological theories, something they are unlikely to share. There is no foundation for an alliance or trade. Non-swarm species cannot be trusted. Our strategic depth is limited to a single star system. We cannot tolerate the existence of an uncontrollable civilization on our doorstep. What is their territorial range? Population size? War potential? We need to gather more information. The intelligent entities voiced their opinions in rapid succession. Luo Wen appreciated this lively exchange. The adage 3 humble cobblers make a genius strategist rang true here. From the myriad perspectives presented, he could extract the insights necessary for his decisions. The swarm was still a newcomer in the vast cosmic community, knowing far too little about external affairs. It would be disastrous if this M37 civilization turned out to be part of some pangalactic alliance, where attacking one would provoke the ire of several others. Clearly, it was time for another round of role-playing, though this time, Luo Wen wouldn't be posing as a god but adopting a different identity. Before that, however, he needed to stall for time until his physical body arrived, allowing him to better play this game. The Riken operation proceeded smoothly. Sergeant Hasmu's squad completed their mission with distinction and received reinforcement from an additional transport craft. The team loaded several relatively intact feral dire wolf carcasses onto the ship. On their way out, they also hunted down several bull demons, bringing them aboard as well. The bull demons, against ranged weapons, were essentially perfect targets. Their sluggish movement made any counterattack impossible, while their strong defenses allowed them to endure energy attacks, giving the Long Idle security team an excellent shooting practice session. Loot, are you telling me that two groups of wild beasts fought, and then some unknown entity dropped a couple of small nukes? Captain Reggie said, his expression skeptical. As ridiculous as it sounds, that's what the analysis of the site, samples, and other data indicates. Furthermore, there were two core explosion points, meaning two nukes were deployed. Dr. Lute shrugged, disavowing any responsibility. Science had reconstructed the scene, and he was merely reporting the results. Who would do something so absurd? Were those beasts special in some way? No. While those creatures are apex predators on this planet, there's nothing remarkable about them other than their large size and numbers. Large numbers? Captain Reggie pondered for a moment before suggesting, could it be that their overpopulation disrupted the ecological balance, prompting their eradication? Dr. Lute looked visibly shocked. Are you joking? Waste is disgraceful. If there were too many of them, why not just eat them instead of nuking them? Eat them? Yes. They contain only trace amounts of toxins. During a brief break, I developed a neutralizing agent to eliminate these toxins. Honestly, their meat is excellent, far superior to synthetic meat, Dr. Lute said with a satisfied expression. You ate it? Captain Reggie exclaimed in shock. Dr. Lute shrugged and gave Reggie a knowing look. Want to try some? No. That's against regulations. Reggie said sternly. Unless you're still alive a month from now, I won't consider it. Dr. Lute rolled his eyes. Any other anomalies? Captain Reggie asked, steering the conversation back on track. Yes, Dr. Lute nodded. We found no remnants of any projectile casings at the explosion site. Normally, even with the extreme temperatures millions of degrees that can vaporize most materials during a nuclear detonation, some fragments or traces of the delivery system usually remain due to the brief duration of the heat. However, we've thoroughly searched the site and found no evidence of artificial constructs. I even dispatched teams for additional searches with more drones and expanded the search area, but we still found nothing. The two men fell silent. After a moment, Captain Reggie asked, do you have any other suggestions? We must continue searching, with more personnel and a broader scope. But we've already confirmed via satellite that there's no trace of civilization on the surface, Captain Reggie countered. Even so, we need to comb through the area thoroughly. We might uncover other clues. With our current manpower, that would be an enormous undertaking and would take a significant amount of time, Captain Reggie noted. What choice do we have? With no other leads, are we supposed to just walk away? Dr. Lute said, leaving the room without waiting for a response. As he watched Dr. Lute depart, Captain Reggie fell into deep thought. Returning empty-handed wasn't an option. Though they might gain some recognition for the journey, this century-long mission had far greater aspirations than mere accolades. Overlord, the M37 inhabitants have begun a grid search of the continent. Based on their methods and identification features, we've determined they've deployed 5 armed ships and 6 transport vessels, with a total of 423 personnel, a deputy reported to Luo Wen. Ensure all our bugs remain hidden. They must not be exposed. Permit self-destruction if necessary, Luo Wen commanded. For the alien civilization's small-scale operation, even with advanced technology, completing a search of 5 continents would take an extraordinarily long time. This worked in the swarm's favor. The swarm had a comprehensive understanding of the planet's conditions and knew this search would yield no significant results. For now, they needed only to remain hidden, maintaining their cover. The longer the alien civilization wasted time, the better it was for the swarm. With just a few hundred personnel tackling the enormous task of surveying 5 continents, years passed in the blink of an eye. Day after day, the Riken research team and security forces repeated the same tasks. Every animal and plant species on the surface required sampling and preservation as specimens. Even rocks, sand, and water samples were collected and analyzed. Limited manpower and equipment slowed their progress. Despite running equipment 24/7, a backlog of samples awaited testing. However, as these samples were catalogued into the central computer, a comprehensive ecological database of the Great Dawn planet gradually took shape. Chapter 207, Gradually Unveiling the Truth. Overlord, Knight 3857 is honored to serve you, greeted the knight controlling the bioship, sensing Luo Wen's consciousness descend. A year earlier, 2 Egret-class transport ships carrying Luo Wen's physical body had traversed the outermost asteroid belt of the neighboring star system and arrived near planet A5. The 2 bioships, disguised as meteors, didn't head directly for the Great Dawn planet. For a bioship to reach the Great Dawn planet, it required multiple deceleration maneuvers and orbital adjustments, behaviors inconsistent with a natural meteor. Additionally, the swarm lacked information about the observation capabilities of the alien civilization's shipborne systems. Such maneuvers could expose anomalies in the meteor disguise. To remain cautious, the 2 meteors simulated being captured by the gravitational pull of planet A5, following a natural trajectory to impact satellite 2 of planet A5. After landing, Luo Wen's consciousness descended to inspect his physical body, which had been dormant for decades but remained in good condition. Satisfied, he directed the fungal carpet to begin its work and ordered the hatching of 10 brood queen eggs. Thanks to advancements in swarm technology, the Egret-class transport ships, which no longer required an ecological recycling system, featured significantly larger internal spaces than older swarm meteors. These spaces could carry much more cargo. Luo Wen's personal transport ships alone housed dozens of brood queen eggs, each of which had been in close proximity to his physical body and was encoded with the latest gene library version. A month later, the swarm base on satellite A5B2 began to take shape. Besides hatching auxiliary worker species for excavation, the brood queens focused on producing bioship eggs. During the egg development period, the swarm discovered a radiation-rich mining area on the satellite. Though the neighboring star system lacked giant gaseous planets that could serve as massive energy sources, certain radiation deposits were adequate substitutes. Once hatched, the bioship larvae thrived in the radiated caverns, which had been excavated into vast chambers. When the larvae reached a size of 3 to 4 meters, they were sent into space to absorb cosmic radiation directly. These bioships, primarily composed of transparent aerogel-like materials, were further camouflaged with a coating of nanocrystals. Without close-range, focused detection, they were nearly impossible to spot. While the swarm continued amassing strength near planet A5, the Riken's investigations on the Great Dawn planet yielded initial results. Reggie, after years of effort, we've mapped out the planetary surface and constructed a comprehensive model. However, apart from a few more sites with radiation remnants, we've found nothing else, Dr. Lute reported in the captain's quarters. Besides Dr. Lute, the room also held Captain Reggie and Major Camis, who oversaw the mission's security. These 3 were the most powerful figures aboard the Cat's Ear spaceship, representing administration, military, and science respectively. Though the meeting appeared informal, it carried significant weight. So, the anomalies must be hidden underground or underwater. A subterranean or deep-sea civilization. Captain Reggie speculated. It's too early to conclude that. For years, we've been operating openly on the surface without encountering any attacks. If a civilization is hidden here, their restraint is extraordinary, Dr. Lute reasoned. Captain Reggie nodded in agreement. If he were in their position, he would have at least attempted contact. He glanced at Major Camis, whose expression betrayed the military's impatience. They would likely resort to force rather than wait. Still, I believe the possibility of a subterranean civilization is higher, Captain Reggie remarked. I've allocated most satellite resources to monitoring oceanic anomalies and directed Celia to focus processing power on analyzing these areas. Yet we've found nothing. Given the lack of artificial evidence in planetary orbit, it seems they haven't ventured into space. Surveillance from 10 kilometers above the surface should be undetectable. If we still can't find anything, they're likely not underwater. That's possible, but I have another hypothesis, Dr. Lute interjected, pausing before nodding. then shaking his head as if deliberating. What is it? What if the nuclear explosions were caused by a creature, a biological entity stronger than the beasts we've seen? A predator that usually hibernates but emerges to hunt when hungry. That would explain the anomalies quite well. I thought you were a scientist, but it turns out you're a fantasist. Do you have any idea what temperatures such a creature would need to endure internally? It's impossible, Captain Reggie retorted, his expression shifting as Dr. Lute remained serious. You're not joking. Of course not. The universe is vast and filled with unknowns. We shouldn't define it with our limited understanding of science, Dr. Lute replied confidently. Have you discovered something? Near the two initial radiation sites, I found several shallow pits along the coast, about 10 kilometers away. These pits are remarkably uniform in size and shape. Analyzing the surrounding environment and sediment layers suggests they are footprints of some kind of creature. Initially, the footprints were likely much deeper but became shallow due to the high water content in the sand near the sea. I estimate their formation to be about 10 years ago. You're saying these footprints coincide with the timeline of the observed fusion reactions? Captain Reggie immediately grasped the implication. Exactly. Imagine two groups of beasts clashing on the plains. Suddenly, a massive creature emerges from the sea, fires two fusion blasts at them from a distance, and then returns to the ocean. That's beyond imagination, Captain Reggie admitted, stunned by the concept of a creature capable of firing fusion attacks. It's just a theory. But if true, the creature would be colossal, over 100 meters tall and weighing tens of thousands of tons, Dr. Lute explained. Captain Reggie's lips moved, but he hesitated to voice the phrase "that's unscientific." If Luo Wen were present, he would have applauded Dr. Lute's deduction. Aside from the exact parties involved in the plains battle, the doctor had almost perfectly reconstructed the events. Seeing his friend's astonished expression, Dr. Lute chuckled. Don't worry. Even if it's true, it's just a creature. We're a spacefaring civilization. Are we really afraid of one monster? Chapter 208, Meteor Shower. Lute understood that his old friend wasn't afraid of the potentially powerful beast. Instead, it was the impact on his perception that had shaken him. Once he noticed Reggie calming down, Lute continued, "This is our opportunity. Compared to a lower civilization, perhaps this beast could be of greater help to us. It could elevate our biotechnology system significantly, potentially even extending our species' life expectancy once more." Hearing this, not only did Captain Reggie start to breathe heavily, but even Major Camis, who had previously been playing the role of a background figure, showed signs of a physical reaction. If Lute's words were true, they would be heroes among the Riken people. Not only would their names be etched in history, but they would also enjoy immense wealth and prestige upon their return. Whether in commerce, politics, or the military, they would have endless capital and credentials to back them. So, do you have any suggestions for the next steps? Captain Reggie asked. The equipment we brought isn't sufficient to survey all the ocean areas. If we do nothing, we'll likely have to wait for the beast to appear on its own again. And who knows how long that could take. Considering the decades-long interval between the two fusion reactions we detected, none of us wants to wait that long, Lute replied. Is there any way to quickly verify your hypothesis? Major Camis suddenly interjected, clearly deeply moved by Lute's words. This was no surprise, as no one would volunteer for a mission spanning over 100 years without a good reason. Not for now. I need time to think. What you need to do now is gather more information. Start by surveying the land, then see if there are any underground caverns. If there's a beast hidden underground, that would be ideal. If not, we can consider how to lure it out of the ocean, Lute explained. Captain Reggie and Major Camis exchanged glances and nodded. Major Camis, the next phase will be tough on you and your team, Captain Reggie said. It's part of the job. Major Camis saluted sharply before turning to leave. Lute shrugged at Reggie, pulling a humorous face, and left the captain's quarters as well. After establishing a concealed base on Great Ursa planet in the neighboring star system, the swarm faced a dilemma on how to infiltrate Great Dawn planet. The alien spaceship hovered in orbit around Great Dawn planet, accompanied by a dense array of satellites. The swarm found it challenging to approach the planet without alarming the aliens. Overlord, they only have one spaceship, and their technological level is limited. They shouldn't be able to monitor the entire neighboring star system comprehensively. Perhaps we can create a meteor shower as a distraction to infiltrate Great Dawn planet, an intelligent entity suggested. Great Ursa planet played a role in the neighboring star system comparable to that of a gas giant like A7 in the origin star system. Although not a gas giant, Great Ursa planet had the largest mass among the planets in the neighboring star system. As a result, its gravity captured numerous asteroids and meteors from beyond the system. While some crashed directly onto its surface, the rest became trapped in its orbit, forming a ring of debris over time. The intelligent entity's suggestion had merit, but the orbital debris wouldn't leave their trajectories without external influence. Implementing this plan would require careful planning. 6 months later, a swarm meteor, traveling at nearly 1% of the speed of light, crashed into Great Ursa planet. The incredible velocity caused the meteor to vaporize upon impact. However, the collision still inflicted massive damage on the planet. A crater over 100 kilometers wide formed on the surface, and the shockwave kicked up towering waves of dust and debris. The impact caused a brief disruption in Great Ursa planet's gravitational balance. This interference extended to its many moons and the countless meteoroids in its orbital ring, altering their gravitational interactions. As a result, over 300 meteoroids of varying sizes were ejected from their original orbits and began hurtling toward Great Dawn planet. Beep! Beep! Flashing red lights and a piercing alarm suddenly rang out aboard the Cat's Ear spaceship. Crew members, previously resting, rushed back to their stations. Celia, what's going on? Did Major Camis and his team find the beast? Captain Reggie asked as he hurriedly donned his uniform and emerged from the lounge. Captain, a meteor collision just occurred on T855 planet. 312 meteors have been dislodged from the orbital debris ring and are projected to reach T853 planet in 1,472 hours, Celia's mechanical voice reported. Realizing it wasn't a beast-related discovery, Reggie's anxious excitement immediately waned. After a quick calculation, he roared, "Damn it, there are still over 2 months left. Why the hell are you triggering an emergency alert now? According to the Federation Aerospace Safety Memorandum, I am obligated to sound the alarm and alert all personnel on the ship under such circumstances," Celia replied with unwavering precision, unaffected by Reggie's outburst. "Have Dr. Lute's research team prepare a response report. And turn off that infernal noise." Reggie barked. "Authorization verified. Complying with your instructions." The red light and alarm ceased immediately. Reggie took a deep breath, shed his uniform, and returned to the lounge. Hours later, in the captain's quarters of the Cat's Ear spaceship. "Lute, what's the situation?" Celia's report claims that while the gravitational disruption caused by the meteor collision on T855 was brief, it shouldn't result in a meteor shower, Reggie asked. "Calm down, Reggie. This is perfectly normal. We don't know T855's exact mass or geological structure, so we can't accurately simulate the outcomes. The impact might have hit a geological cavity, causing effects far greater than we anticipated," Lute replied casually as he reviewed the data. "Have you prepared a response plan? There's too much data. Our ship's main computer is already overloaded with other tasks and can't spare the computational power to simulate the trajectories of over 300 meteors, Lute explained. Noticing Reggie's frustration, he quickly added, "Don't worry. When the meteor shower arrives, we'll hide the ship behind the planet. At most, we'll lose a few insignificant small satellites. Those satellites are irreplaceable while we're so far from home," Reggie countered. He understood the ship would be safe. The planetary shield and 2 months of preparation time ensured that. If the ship were damaged in the meteor shower, he might as well jump off the bridge himself. What concerned him were the satellites, as their loss would mean no chance of repair or replacement. Lute, sensing his friend's concern, thought for a moment and said, "Even if the ship's computer could handle it, calculating the trajectories of over 300 meteors would be incredibly complex. The lack of data about the gravitational interactions between the planets and moons further complicates matters. So, if you want to save the satellites, the only solution is to temporarily retrieve them using transport shuttles. We might lose some satellite monitoring range, but communication won't be affected. However, this will increase Major Camis's workload. Those soldiers are always brimming with energy, they'll enjoy a bit of fresh air. Don't we need to monitor the meteor shower?" Reggie asked. "If you're willing to sacrifice the satellites, I'd be happy to collect some data. In that case, forget it. You shouldn't waste your time on such things." Chapter 209, Arrival. The swarm was unaware of the Cat's Ear spaceship's plans. If Luo Wen and the intelligent entities knew that Great Dawn Planet's response to the Cat's Ear spaceship involved temporarily collecting its satellites, their actions would have been much bolder. The Cat's Ear spaceship's onboard computer was not wrong in its analysis. A simple meteorite impact could not have caused this meteor shower. However, with missing data and no knowledge that someone was targeting them, it was impossible to detect the anomaly. All of this was within the swarm's expectations. Each of these meteorites had hollowed-out interiors that contained swarm bioships. Although they were only small flying ant-class ships due to time constraints, they were fully functional aside from the inability to carry electromagnetic cannon components. When Great Ursa Planet's gravitational tides became chaotic, these ships activated their plasma thrusters from within the meteorites. Despite their small size of 5 to 10 meters, the thrust they generated made a difference. Sometimes, a slight additional force can change everything. As a result, more than 300 meteorites deviated from their original trajectories and headed toward Great Dawn Planet. In total, the swarm had prepared over 1,000 meteorites, of which only around 300 succeeded in changing course. Inside these meteorites, apart from the bioships, were 2 of Luo Wen's avatars and dozens of brood queen eggs. If they managed to land on the Great Dawn Planet, it wouldn't take long for the swarm to develop a staggering force. At that point, Luo Wen's role-playing game would officially begin. Meanwhile, on Great Ursa Planet, efforts to produce more bioship eggs continued at full capacity. Even if Luo Wen's plan failed, backup contingencies were in place. 2 months later. Overlord, the meteorite cluster is about to reach Great Dawn Planet. To avoid alerting the alien spaceship, the meteorite's courses cannot be altered. Of the 312 meteorites in this wave, 306 will impact the planet's surface, while 6 will strike its first moon, an intelligent entity reported to Luo Wen. Luo Wen nodded. This was unavoidable, everything needed to appear as a natural phenomenon. If the alien spaceship collected trajectory data and noticed any unexplained changes, it would raise suspicion. Overlord, no traces of artificial satellites have been detected along the planet's orbit facing the meteorite shower. Luo Wen recalled how, hours earlier, intelligent entities had reported that the alien spaceship had deployed 10 transport ships, busied itself in orbit, and then retreated to the far side of Great Dawn Planet. At the time, ground-based observation conditions were poor, leaving the purpose of the transport ships unknown. The intelligent entities had speculated that some devices were being set up, but it turned out they were simply retrieving the satellites. Such frugality! They even take their satellites back. Luo Wen mused, reflecting on his own practices. Had he been too wasteful, recalling outdated or inefficient swarm units without much thought? Though he reasoned that little had been wasted and that the swarm, being composed of intelligent entities and brood nest creations, required no salaries or rations. Many combat units even operated on radiation energy systems, virtually eliminating their food requirements. Perhaps only a civilization like the swarm has the potential to develop to such heights. At least in terms of resource utilization, we're light years ahead of most, Luo Wen thought, silently praising the swarm. With the satellites gone, there was no longer any worry about the meteorites being noticed as they passed close by. Hundreds of massive fireballs, trailing fiery tails, plummeted from the sky. Most fell into the ocean, while a smaller number aimed for the 2 continents facing the meteorite shower. Initially, Luo Wen had prepared a meticulous ground reception team to handle any inspections the alien spaceship might conduct after the meteorites landed. However, with the satellites gone, Luo Wen felt no need for such caution. Hidden within the meteorites destined for the continents were bioships. Shielded by the firelight, they emerged either alone or carrying brood queen eggs from the meteorites. Equipped with optical cloaking systems and avoiding any energy emissions, these ships were nearly impossible to detect. Rather than using electromagnetic drives, they relied on their low-mass bodies to free fall. Once on the ground, they remained stationary. Moments later, cloaked storm gods arrived to pick them up and move them away. Although outdated models, the storm gods relied on winged flight, which produced no energy emissions. Combined with their optical cloaking, they offered exceptional stealth capabilities. Originally deemed obsolete, they were called back into service precisely because the satellites had been withdrawn. Transferring from the ground always left some traces, after all. Dr. Lute, we've collected most of the meteorite fragments that fell to the ground. The materials are nothing special, though it's strange that many of them have hollow interiors, an assistant reported. Perhaps their peculiar structure is why they were flung away by T-855, Lute speculated. Unaware of hidden factions at work, he dismissed the meteorite's odd structures as unimportant. These matters could be studied later when the Riken fully occupied the planet. For now, finding the rumored monster was his top priority. His future prosperity depended on it. Have the detection devices I ordered set up gathered any useful data? Lute inquired. With surface searches nearing completion, the next phase involved exploring underground and oceanic regions. To investigate underground structures, the plan had been to deploy seismic charges. However, limited spaceship capacity meant few charges could be brought. Lute had even considered crafting makeshift explosives from local materials on Great Dawn Planet. Learning of the meteor shower, Lute had instructed his team to install numerous observation devices on land alongside Major Kami's search team. By analyzing the seismic impact of the meteorites, they hoped to locate large underground cavities or at least narrow down future search areas. Either way, it was a worthwhile effort. About to report, sir. Instruments on the second and third continents have detected anomalies resembling large subterranean cavities. I'm sending the coordinates now, the assistant replied. Lute nodded, checked his terminal, and headed toward the captain's room. Chapter 210, The Elite Squad. Drip, drip. Water trickled down through cracks in the rock ceiling, dripping off stalactites to the cave floor below. A team of around 30 individuals cautiously advanced through the underground cave passage. Tactical flashlights mounted on their helmets illuminated the dark tunnel, casting flickering beams of light. Shadows from the numerous stalagmites created an eerie and unsettling atmosphere. However, this team consisted of elites among elites. They were unfazed by such surroundings. Captain, do you know what we're really looking for? Asked a heavily armored guard. The squad leader was none other than Staff Sergeant Hesmu, who had been ordered to lead his team in investigating a suspicious underground cavity. Search all potential targets, replied Hesmu tersely. It wasn't that he was inherently cold, this was simply his nature. Otherwise, he wouldn't have answered such questions from his subordinates at all. Come on, Captain, you must know more than us. We've been searching on land for 7 or 8 years without finding anything. We thought we'd get a break, but now we're down here searching underground. Yeah, Captain, how long are we going to keep at this? When do we get to go home? Captain, did you sign a confidentiality agreement? Voices chimed in over the comms as the team members peppered Hesmu with their questions. Feeling a headache coming on, Hesmu cut them off with irritation. It's not about confidentiality. After all, we're so far from home. Even if one of you were a spy, without the captain's authorization to use the star system communication device, no message could be sent back anyway. Hesmu himself had been holding back frustration, otherwise, he wouldn't have said so much. As for what exactly we're looking for, I honestly don't know. Even the captain doesn't seem certain. Maybe it's some underground civilization, or perhaps, a monster. A monster. I get the civilization part, that's why we're here. But why is it about a monster now? Could those nuclear radiation levels have been caused by a monster? A sharp guard ventured a guess. Wow, monsters like that only exist in movies, don't they? Come on, Captain, even as a guard, I've had a higher education. Don't joke about this, another chimed in. Hesmu finally had enough of the noisy chatter over the comms and bellowed, enough. Quiet. Don't let your guard down just because things have gone smoothly so far. This planet hides dangers stranger than we can imagine. Though they couldn't see Hesmu's expression through his helmet, his tone conveyed enough to make the team fall silent. The earlier lax attitude was replaced by renewed caution, and their movements as they advanced became more deliberate. Hesmu silently nodded in approval. After years of continuous searching, the initial vigilance of the team had waned when it became clear the planet was mostly primitive. The local wildlife posed no threat to them, leading to some complacency. His warning served as much for himself as for his team. In a crisis, the only things he could rely on were these soldiers and their weapons. Captain, we've found a downward passage ahead. Should we proceed? One member operating a piece of equipment in the middle of the team suddenly reported. Hesmu hurried over and examined the instrument. It was a device that mapped enclosed spaces based on sound waves, similar to echolocation. The readings showed a passage leading deeper underground, extending several hundred meters. He gestured for a teammate to step forward. The soldier unpacked a large backpack, which unfolded into a makeshift workstation complete with joysticks and screens. Under the operator's control, several mechanical spiders emerged from the platform. After stretching their legs, they quickly scuttled into the passage ahead. Given the uncertainty of the underground terrain, drones were less practical, while mechanical spiders proved ideal for these conditions. Although significantly more advanced than drones, the Riken had managed to develop and miniaturize these spider robots. Equipped with cameras, the spiders transmitted real-time footage back to the workstation. The passage ahead was about 5 to 6 meters in diameter, its walls slick with moisture from constant water flow over the years. Thankfully, Riken technology was up to the challenge. The mechanical spiders crawled steadily along the slippery stone walls, descending further and further. After traveling over 500 meters down, the vertical shaft transitioned into a sloped tunnel. The spiders continued for another 100 meters before their transmissions began breaking up into static. "What's going on?" Hasmio demanded. "Captain, the terrain is too complex. There's too much interference. This is as far as the spiders can transmit. Beyond this, they'll lose contact," the operator explained. "Captain, what now? Do we go down?" another team member asked. Hasmio's face clouded. Descending would require using ropes to lower the team one by one, a time-consuming process. Moreover, with the unknown dangers below, a quick retreat would be nearly impossible, making the operation highly risky. After much deliberation, Hasmio couldn't decide and opted to consult his superiors. "Conies, can you reach the spaceship?" he asked. "No, Captain. We're already 300 meters underground, and our equipment isn't powerful enough to penetrate this far," the communications officer, Conies, replied. Out of options, Hasmio ordered the team to maintain their position while he, the communications officer, and 2 other members headed back toward the surface. Half an hour later, Hasmio returned, and the team replenished their rations. After nearly 2 more hours, the remaining 20 members of their squad stationed outside joined them, forming a reinforced unit of 50. The team silently checked their weapons and ammo before logistics personnel unraveled 2 ropes down the pit. Each rope, cobbled together from multiple lengths, stretched 500 meters but had limited load-bearing capacity. With each soldier and their gear weighing about 150 kilograms, each rope could only support 2 soldiers at a time. Thankfully, the descent proceeded without incident. After nearly 2 hours of rappelling, the entire squad finally reached the bottom of the pit.